Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Profiles in Risk. I'm your host, Nick Lamparelli. Very pleased this afternoon to be speaking to Curtis Goldsborough. Curtis is a client and product developer at the National Insurance Inspection Services Company. Curtis, welcome to Profiles in Risk.
Hey, thanks so much, Nick. It's great to be here, and long-time listener, first-time caller. So
love that. No one's ever used that before. We had a conversation last week, and I immediately was like, let's get you on a podcast because inspection services, it's something I think the insurance industry takes for granted. It just sort of happens in the background. Inspection gets ordered, it just kind of happens. Data gets passed around, but I don't think anyone really understands some of the mechanics around it, how your business model works and functions. And interestingly, as going through your website, how much InsurTech is involved in the inspection arena. So I always start off every podcast by giving the floor to my guest as an elevator pitch. What is an NIIS, and what do you do there?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I like to say we take the literal approach to business naming, so we try to spell it out, right in the, hey, this is who we are. This is what we do.
It's better than in general inspection.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. I like to say a couple of months ago, I downloaded an app. I thought I was going to get a cold citrus beverage delivered to me, and I ended up with a renter's policy. Now it was a good renter's policy, but it was.
I wonder which one that could be.
No, but seriously, yeah, we, National Insurance Inspection Services, we've been around for about 12 years now. Our owner and president, Larry Llewellyn, has been in the business for 40 plus years. Was co-owner of another company before starting National about 12 years ago. And so we do insurance loss control inspections for carriers, MGAs, and then even some larger agencies around the country. We're currently inspecting in 49 states. Alaska, the only exception. It's just too dang cold up there to do inspections. So,
but you included Hawaii.
We do Hawaii. Yes,
you pick the right non-contiguous state.
Yep, absolutely. I've been campaigning for 5 years, Nick, to go do some field training in Hawaii, but I haven't gotten the green light on that yet.
We got to improve your persuasion skills.
Yeah, right.
For listeners or viewers that don't understand loss control and the term loss control, what does that mean?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I mean, there's certainly lots of different niches in terms of, whether you're talking about, risk management, some people might call it, or loss control. Sometimes it can just be a lot of semantics. In our kind of niche of the industry, loss control just means, on the front end underwriting side, when a new policy is written, obviously, underwriters want to have some control over the potential risk or the potential losses that they could anticipate for that individual property. And so, for our purposes, that's kind of the niche that we're in. When a new policy is written, we're going to provide, data and resources for an underwriter to look at to determine, what's the potential for loss of this property? Does it, A, even meet our eligibility requirements and, satisfy our underwriting guidelines? And then B, do we have it rated properly for premium purposes? And do we fully understand all of the liability exposures here on this property? So I guess that's kind of a broad, maybe a broad description of loss control for our purposes and our niche that we work in.
I've probably ordered hundreds of them,
Right.
probably almost entirely as a broker.
Mm-hmm.
And so you order it, it comes back, you send it to the carrier sends you a note and says, hey, there's a crack in the sidewalk, someone could trip. So send it back to the broker and the homeowner, tell them to fix it, and then there's back and forth. But I've seen everything from that to there's paint chipping on the side of the building, and the carrier's like, can you tell us when they're going to get a paint job? I was like,
Yeah.
Really? That's how deep this is going,
Right.
in some of these inspections?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's always, I think from my perspective anyway, and being involved in kind of on the client and product development side, I work really hard in developing those relationships and onboarding on the front end to sit down with the lead underwriter or, VP of underwriting or whatever it may be and say,
Yep.
hey, let's really drill down on your specific underwriting guidelines. What do you care about? Do you really care about that cracking sidewalk? Do you really care about that chipping paint? Because at the end of the day, most inspection vendors, like the company that I work for, National, we kind of have our own standardized inspection forms, kind of templates that we might use that cover the gamut, for a lot of clients. And then obviously we customize those inspection forms for a lot of clients as well. But, kind of our standard form would cover the entire gamut because, as you mentioned, some carriers do get that granular with it. They are concerned about, some of those very minor things. And it kind of, for most carriers, it depends, what end of the spectrum they're on. Are they a preferred carrier, or are they kind of more on the other end of the spectrum in non-preferred markets? And that has a huge impact.
Yep. So how'd you get into it? What was your background and what made you decide that, hey, this looks like fun?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I kind of have maybe a little bit of a unique path into the insurance space and then certainly into the loss control space.
No one has a unique path. You end up hearing all these stories about how people get into insurance, and it's like there's that small handful that's just like, yeah, I always knew I was going to get into insurance.
Right.
Those people, and you kind of roll your eyes. And then there's the rest of us. It's like, I need
Yep.
a job. I was a lawyer. I came from economics and said, I'll give insurance a try because I needed a job. That's how it usually happens. What's your story?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know. I like to think that mine is a little bit unique, or maybe a more on the unique
Let's find out.
So I graduate from Bible college with a degree in theology. And
I think we can stop. It's already unique. Let's stop. Just kidding. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I find myself as an ordained minister out of college and
It's getting better.
And serving in nonprofit ministry roles, working primarily with youth, really enjoying that. Did that for about 7 years, and different circumstances, it was time for a change.
Mm-hmm.
And so from there, I had kind of taught myself a lot about kind of media production. This was around the time of when digital video was kind of, really coming on the scene. So kind of followed that niche for a little while, worked for some public access television, kind of got my feet wet in the media production side of things. Believe it or not, I had, this was small town, rural northern Michigan, up in the frozen tundra. My local personal insurance agent that insured my home and auto, I was stopped into the office one day to, add a new truck or something like that. And he said, "Hey, Curtis, I'm getting ready to retire." And it just kind of jokingly said, "You want to become an insurance agent?" And, I kind of laughed. And so,
the right message at the right time.
Yeah, absolutely. It was exactly that. And at first I kind of blew him off. And then one thing led to another. Next thing I know, I'm a licensed agent with Farm Bureau Insurance of Michigan, assumed his book of business and grew that book for the next 5 years or so. That was kind of my first introduction to insurance inspections. Honestly, as an agent, I hated insurance inspections.
Of course.
They're a pain in the neck.
Yeah.
They're always incorrect, at least from my perspective. I remember writing my parents' house. This is literally the house that I grew up in. Farm Bureau orders an inspection on it after I write the house, and I get the inspection back, and the inspection says that the house that I grew up in, has a full basement and it's on a slab, and I'm like, come on, guys, really? And then obviously the things like you mentioned, I write a house and, this, in my mind, this is a preferred risk. I write an entire portfolio of business, for people, write their home, their vacation home, 6 or 7, personal auto, write their business auto policy, etc. Write some life insurance on them, annuity, you name it. And then the company comes back and says, "Hey, this inspection report shows that there's peeling paint on the fascia. When are they going to fix this?"
Yeah.
That was kind of my introduction to the kind of loss control inspection side of things. And so I did that for 5 years and always thought that, there's got to be some improvements that can happen in this. There's got to be a better way to do this that would be less frustrating for agents and ultimately would be more more profitable, and a better process for carriers.
Yeah. What are the types of characteristics that make for a good inspector?
That's a great question. I mean, there's definitely a handful of things that I would say a good inspector, and, someone that we're looking for when we're, onboarding a new inspector here at National. Probably the number one thing would just be organizational skills. Inspectors are juggling a lot. They have stuff coming at them all the time. Again, kind of in our niche with insurance inspections, if an inspector is staying busy, especially if they're working at this full time, they're cranking out 25, 30, sometimes 40 inspections a day. They're quick on their feet. They're moving quickly.
Wait, what was that number? How many a day?
We're talking anywhere from 20 to 40 a day.
Wow.
And again, keeping in mind, and this is where I think where a lot of times there's some confusion, because when people hear the word inspection, just that word kind of gives it a connotation of maybe a more detailed process in people's minds than what might be the reality.
It could literally be someone shows up and just takes a few pictures of the outside of the home, that type of thing.
It absolutely could be. And obviously there's a myriad of different inspection types, but absolutely right. A drive-by inspection is a thing. There are some
inspection.
Yep. Where an inspector they're not even required to get out of their car. They pull up to the curb, snap a couple photos, and they're on their way. It takes 30 seconds. That's one end of the spectrum. And then the other end of the spectrum would be what we would consider a more comprehensive interior exterior inspection, where you are contacting the policyholder to schedule an appointment. You're going to gain interior access. You're going to photograph the inside, the outside of the home. You're going to take measurements, around the exterior perimeter of the home, calculate living space, square footage, et cetera, and those inspections could take 30 minutes, 45 minutes, depending on the size of the home and everything in between.
So let's break down workload. How much would you say is personal lines versus commercial lines?
So yeah, that's a great question. Here at National, we are really laser focused on personal lines and specifically just residential property, it's a little bit different than, a lot of the other inspection vendors out there. A lot of inspection vendors have kind of diversified. A lot of them do equal amounts of commercial and personal lines. A lot of them are branching out into other things, appraisal services, telephone surveys, a premium audit, is a big thing right now. Certainly nothing wrong with doing that. I mean, there's lots of money to be made out there in all of those areas for sure. But we've kind of taken the approach of we want to do one thing and we want to be the best inspection vendor out there. We're laser focused on that. We're going to provide the best value, the highest quality possible. And so we've really put all of our energy just into the residential side of things. Maybe at some point in the future, we'll, look to expand on it, but we just really honed in on that. And we're focusing on doing one thing the best that we can. We want to be the premier provider in that niche rather than doing a bunch of things and maybe not doing them, to the best of our ability.
Casualty is usually or liability is usually very underrated when it comes to that. What do your inspections capture when it comes to potential liability to a homeowner's policy?
Yeah, absolutely. That's, one of the primary things that we're looking at. When you're looking at an insurance loss control inspection, really we're providing three specific kind of areas of data or data points to a carrier. The first thing that we're doing, the majority of the time is gathering info on the dwelling itself. So structure, features, finishes. Let's verify that square footage, make sure that we know what the actual square footage of the home is. What is the roofing material? What is the siding material? What type of foundation are we looking at? Obviously, all of those, factors playing a key role in determining what's the actual replacement cost of this home. And on the carrier side, do we have the appropriate coverage in place, for this home? Or have we overinsured or underinsured this home, on the application? So, so that's the first thing. The second thing is, are there any physical damage concerns with the property as it exists? We just wrote a new policy on this property. Was there pre-existing damage on this, that we're going to see a claim filed on 2 weeks from now, where this damage happened long before we were ever even on the risk? So, we want to identify those physical damage concerns. So is there missing siding, or is the roof in poor shape, or any of those types of things? So that's kind of the second piece. And then the third piece is absolutely identifying, those liability concerns that are on the property, whether that's, as you mentioned earlier, trip and fall hazards, cracking sidewalks, missing handrails on steps. Is there a pit bull in the backyard? That's going
trampolines,
swimming pools with slides or diving boards, and again, every carrier has their own guidelines and their own, appetites in terms of what they're willing to accept and what they're not comfortable with. So yeah, we absolutely do all of those things on the liability side as well.
Are you ever asked to do any sort of inspection in regards to contents or internal or external mechanical equipment?
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, we offer, and most vendors, inspection vendors, offer what we call them supplements. So you can order an exterior inspection, and if you're concerned about, maybe the mechanicals of the home, you can add on what we call an EHP supplement, electrical heating and plumbing supplement. So that just means, the inspector is going to go inside the house. He's going to go through a checklist of questions with the homeowner. He's going to, provide photos of the, furnace, water heater, plumbing under the sinks, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And, those types of things we can certainly do. And honestly, they're becoming more and more popular.
Okay.
I think because the reality is a lot of those homes that were built in the 60s, 70s, or prior, have galvanized plumbing. It's about the time that plumbing is starting to fail. And that's why, you're kind of seeing industry-wide, I think they're saying right now about 30% of all homeowners claims are interior water damage claims that originated from inside the home because those galvanized pipes are failing. A lot of carriers now are saying, hey, if we write a home that's pre-1970, we need this EHP supplement. We need to find out, what kind of plumbing is in this home because there's significant risk factors there.
What kind of plumbing does cause a problem?
So galvanized.
Explain what that means.
Most modern homes, if you have a brand new construction home, pretty much all the plumbing in that home is probably going to be, PVC plumbing or some derivative of that. There's a bunch of, even newer products out there. Copper would still be, pretty common use as well. But that, older galvanized plumbing that was used, on main supply lines and then even a lot of the distribution throughout the house, you're talking that's, 50 years old now and it's failing at joints, it's rusting, it's becoming corroded and it's breaking. Apart from, obviously the freezing, breakage of plumbing, based on freezing and the colder climates. But even beyond that, those pipes have reached the end of their usable life and they fail, and cause significant water losses.
Yeah. So how does someone become an inspector? We talked about good, like characteristics of someone being an inspector, but who should consider potentially becoming an inspector and how would they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. I can't speak industry-wide, but my best assessment based on my knowledge and my exposure, I would say that the majority of loss control inspection work that happens in the country is done by people who are not full-time inspectors. A lot of people do it kind of as a side gig.
Really?
Some of our best inspectors here at National are honestly retirees who they're just looking for something to do. They're looking for something to keep busy at,
Interesting. Okay.
And honestly, those are some of our best inspectors. They have the life experience, the organizational skills, they have the people skills. They're just in it to, for something to do. They like to meet people. They like to talk to people and they do a fantastic job. That's not to say that there aren't, or that there is an opportunity for people to do loss control inspections full time. There absolutely is. And we have a lot of inspectors, obviously, specifically in more urban areas. Where the work volume, is enough to keep them busy. They do inspect full time. But yeah, I mean, it really does. It covers the gamut. And because there's really a pretty low entry point to get in our specific niche, there is no specific required licensing. There's no specific required certification. Every inspection vendor, obviously has kind of their own onboarding process and training process. Probably the majority of inspection vendors work on an IC basis. We don't hire on inspectors as employees. You're a 1099, an independent contractor.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a handful of vendors out there that use an employee model, but the majority of us, use an IC model. And most of us, we kind of onboard through a handful of specific channels. If you want to become an inspector, hop on our website, submit your resume. We'll take a look at it. We'll ask you a handful of questions. What area are you willing to cover? You'll get piped right into our orientation and training process. Here at National, I've kind of been integrally involved in that and have developed over the last 5 years our orientation program and curriculum that essentially will take someone that, may have limited exposure or limited experience to really anything in the insurance industry or even in the contracting industry or building trades. And we can take someone from no knowledge and get them up to speed. And with a little bit of, jumping in and getting your feet wet and learning by doing, someone can be up to speed, really quickly and can do fantastic work.
Oh, that's really interesting. I knew nothing about that. So that's, especially for people that are listening, that a lot of young professionals are interested in the side hustle.
Yep.
And this would be a way to get exposure to a different aspect of the industry that could have ramifications or give them exposure to other industries as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Really,
we have a lot of, because people are doing this as a side gig. I had mentioned retirees, but even a lot of people who are maybe in the building trades, they'll do loss control inspection work for us just to fill in the gaps in their schedule.
Sure.
Whether that's, just kind of slow times in the year based on geography and climate and whatnot. There's always inspection work, that can be done. So it really does help fill the gaps for a lot of people.
Yeah. How has it changed over the years since you first got started?
I can, only speak for, basically the last 10 years as I've had any exposure to it. Although, I love to sit down with Larry, our president, and he's been in the business for 40 years and talk to him about, how it's changed over the last 4 decades. I think, a lot of the changes have been very similar to any industry. 20 years ago, inspectors were, literally receiving their orders in the mail on paper, going out in the field with a Polaroid camera, snapping Polaroid photos, shaking them in front of the house, making sure that they look good, filling out paper reports by hand, putting that all back in the mail and, sending it back to the home office. And you're talking about turnaround time for carriers being 2-3 months sometimes, before they get inspection results back. And obviously that, had a huge impact on underwriting, back then. So kind of fast forward, obviously everything has gone digital now. Inspectors receive work, in real time, on mobile devices. They can submit their work on mobile devices. Obviously, nobody's using Polaroids anymore. Inspectors are using digital cameras, most of them just using their smartphones now. So just kind of that kind of standard, technological evolution has certainly been very prevalent in our industry. And really now, just in the last 5 years, like all of InsurTech, things are really speeding along pretty quickly. Some of this newer technology is certainly coming into play. And I think like any industry, one of the interesting dynamics is that there certainly is the element of technology replacing inspectors. That's starting to play into it. But at the end of the day, who knows where technology might be, 10 years or 15 years or 20 years from now. But I tell our inspectors on a regular basis, there is no more accurate and trustworthy and reliable information than a knowledgeable inspector, boots on the ground, standing in front of that house, analyzing the risk and providing that data. There's a boatload and just a proliferation of third-party data sources now. It seems like there's a new one every week coming out, and everybody's touting that, they have the most accurate data or the most reliable data. And I think all of those companies and startups and whatnot, I think they do provide great value, and they certainly have their place, and they'll continue to evolve and to provide more value and efficiency to the process. But at the end of the day, I don't think inspectors are ever going to be completely replaced. They're always going to have their niche. They're always going to have their place. Though I would certainly submit that I think the standard traditional field inspection is certainly going to lose some ground, certainly over the next 5 years. It already has to some extent. So it'll be interesting to see how it continues to evolve.
And NIIS is active in technology.
Yeah.
So you actually are expanding how you use technology to do inspections. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So about 3 years ago, we were starting to see all this proliferation, of InsurTech coming on the scene. And we're kind of trying to, to shake the 8 ball and see, what's coming down the pipe in our industry. Because at the end of the day, like any industry, companies that are not willing to innovate and to iterate, they're going to be the losers in the end. Certainly don't want to fall into that category. No. So we started brainstorming, what is that going to look like for us? Where is our kind of niche of the industry going to be, 5 years from now? And, how can we be on the cutting edge of that? And so we went to our clients, we went to our carriers, to our MGAs and said, hey, let's talk about this. Let's talk about where the industry's going. Let's talk about, what are your pinch points? What are your pain points? Yeah. Where do you see inefficiencies? How can we improve this process for you? And we started to get great feedback. Some of those pain points are, one of the biggest ones is just turn time. How quickly does it take to get this inspection done. From the time we see that application and we order that inspection, how quickly can we get those results back? Obviously, that's a huge deal for carriers. In a lot of states, I think most states, maybe you could speak into this, but you've got a 60-day underwriting window. Once you get beyond day 60, you're locked into that risk for the next year. And maybe longer, before you can potentially non-renew if you need to. If you don't get
it's down to 30 days.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
If you can't get those inspection results back quickly, you don't have time to react to what the inspection is, So, you could get stuck on a risk that is completely ineligible based on your underwriting guidelines, but you can't do anything about it because you didn't know until it was too late. So, so that was one big thing that we wanted to, address and say, how can we increase turn times? How can we get quality data back to our carriers as quickly as possible? If you go out and look at inspection vendor websites, most of us are going to tout that we have a standard 20-day turn time. That's kind of been the industry standard, and most carriers have been content to work with that. I would say that has been changing, especially with some of the bigger players over the last few years. They've really been flexing their muscles and saying, we've got a ton of business we can send your way, but guess what? We need this
faster. Yeah.
We need this turned around in 15 days or 10 days or even 7 days, in some regards. So
interesting.
There's definitely been some movement in the industry in that regard. Again, especially with some of the bigger players that have the weight to throw around, and they're going to get what they want one way or the other.
Yep.
So that's added some interesting dynamics. Anyway, as we were getting feedback from our clients and we started to brainstorm, hey, what can we do to innovate and to address some of these inefficiencies? Came up with this concept, and it's certainly wasn't new to us, but there had been a little buzz and talk going around in the industry about the feasibility of self-inspections. Rather than sending an inspector out to this property, why can't we have a policyholder essentially do their own inspection on their own home? So we just started exploring opportunities, having conversations with clients. Hey, what do you guys think about this? We spent 18 months in development of, what we call our E-Survey self-inspection product. It's a mobile web app that allows a policyholder to complete their own self-inspection on their home. So essentially everything that we would be asking our inspector to do, we're asking the policyholder, to do right on their mobile device. And it's going really well. We've got a ton of traction with it. We're seeing some fantastic results, put a lot of time and energy, as I said, 18 months into development and iterations and seeing what works and what doesn't work. We've come up with a really solid product. We have, a handful of clients. We just went live with it about 6 months ago. We've got a handful of clients that are running with it full steam. We're seeing average turnaround times of 4 days or less. Many orders, honestly, are getting turned around the same day, which is really just insane. Imagine an underwriter ordering an inspection, and within hours, they have a full report. It includes interior and exterior photos of the risk, a pre-screened risk rating score based on their own internal underwriting guidelines, accurate ITV confirmation. The policyholders had a seamless and positive experience. There's no stranger showing up at their door to inspect their property. And we're able to deliver all of this at less than half the cost of a traditional field inspection. It really is a game changer, and I'm super excited. We got our first tier 1 carrier on a pilot that's going to launch in about 3 weeks. And so, we'll see how that goes. I'm really, really excited about that, to see some of the bigger players in the market at least saying, hey, we want to take a look at this because we see great potential here and we see this is kind of the way that things are moving. And so for them to look at our product and say, hey, this could be a good fit for us, is super exciting for me, and kind of provides a little bit of validation that, hey, this is where the industry is going. When some of those tier 1 carriers see the value in it and they say, hey, this is a viable option for us. Let's give it a test run. It's been really good. And there certainly have been, every time that you say self-inspection, I know lots of red flags go off in underwriters' minds. Hey, what about this? Is the data that we receive, is it going to, have integrity? Are people going to be intentionally trying to cheating the system, trying to deceive us? And honestly, before we launched the product, we had a lot of those same question marks. Now with 6 months of data to look at, kind of our initial feedback and our initial results have been really, really positive. And I think that some of those things that we perceived maybe would be a huge hurdle, those really are not, they're not coming to reality as being nearly as big of a hurdle as maybe we were afraid they might. So yeah, that's kind of the main thing that we've been focused on, is our E-Survey self-inspection app. Kind of in the InsurTech space. I'm excited to see where it goes. It really is providing a ton of value. There are so many pluses to it. I love talking about it because it's, in my mind, it's kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah, it reminds me of self-service at the grocery store.
Right.
When they first came out, it's like, who would want to do that? And then it's like, no, a lot of people would want to do it because it's faster, I'm sure there are a lot of inspection situations where people don't want strangers coming over to their house. It makes them uncomfortable. So I'm sure there are a lot of opportunities where it just makes a lot of sense to just quickly, all the power in here.
Yes.
You could just take advantage of it and really cut down time, costs, reduce the friction. So I
Yeah,
love that.
absolutely.
InsurTech in the inspection services. I love that. Curtis, this is the part of the podcast where we learn a little bit more about you. I try to ask all my guests questions. It's a shortcut for me because I'm lazy. So I get to learn about new technologies and new books. So first question to you is about that is what tools or techniques do you use to stay productive and or organized?
Ooh, yeah, productive and organized. I would say,
You're an inspector, so I already know that you are organized because you told me a good inspector had to be.
Right. I would have to say, number one, my wife keeps me organized. She's been doing it for 16 years. And no, but seriously, on the tech side, I'm a big fan of Evernote. Been using that for a lot of years. Fantastic tool for, when those, epiphanies happen throughout the day. Keep track of all those thoughts, when you're multitasking and whatnot. CRM, software. We're using Salesforce right now. I love Salesforce. They're doing a great job for us because I do so much kind of on the media side of things. Adobe Creative Cloud is my best friend. I love all of the tools there that help with media production. Slack, certainly Dropbox. I think if I looked at my, bank statement at the end of the month and saw all those $9.99 charges, could probably list off a bunch more.
Hulu, Netflix.
Those are essential. Yeah, those are essential.
Can't live without them. Come on. Have there been any books that you have found to be influential in your business and or personal lives? And are there any books on inspections that any would-be inspector could get their hands on?
Yeah, absolutely. So books, I am an ordained minister, so I better say the Bible.
Mm-hmm. You're not the first one that said that on here.
I would say a very close second, to the Bible would be a book that I actually just started reading. You may have heard of it. It's called The End of Insurance as We Know It. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but
I've never heard of that. Yes.
Yeah, you really should check into that, Nick.
I am the publisher, so thank you for ordering that book.
Yeah, no, I just started that a few days ago on Kindle, and obviously kind of been following Rob's journey with that, and appreciate all that you guys have done in helping facilitate that. I think a recent one that I just finished is called Rework, REWORK, by Jason Fried, and can't remember who the co-author was of that. Some really good stuff in there. I know that book's gotten mixed reviews, and I've heard a lot of strong opinions one way or the other, but just some really great tips that have been really helpful to me just in terms of management, productivity, time management. I think my favorite section of that book is the section entitled Meetings Are Toxic. Talking about how unfortunately it's so easy for meetings to be just hog your entire day and not much gets accomplished, So that's a great book that
pet peeve of mine, and not necessarily meetings. I completely get that. It's folks that only work in meetings, and then when you get your 5 minutes with them, they want like the executive summary to make like critical decisions about the company. It's like that stuff frustrates me to no end. It's like you can't run a business like that. Schedule fewer meetings.
Right. Absolutely.
Are there any books on inspectors that are like the Bible for your industry?
Yeah. There's a little bit out there, although I would definitely say, the fact that you're saying that, it challenges me, gosh, I probably should, write a book on this. Because there's not a whole lot.
They're insurance nerds.
There you go. There's not a whole lot out there in that regard.
Okay.
Again, specifically in our niche.
Yep.
I guess the only thing that I would say is, for home inspections in general, InterNACHI is a fantastic resource. Mm-hmm. Now, again, that is more tailored towards, becoming a licensed and certified actual home inspector, which is a lot of overkill kind of for our niche and what we specifically do. But they do have a ton of great resources on their website and even just the free resources on there, would be a fantastic starting point.
Okay.
They do have a lot of publications and books related to that. That could certainly be a good starting point for people.
Yep. Yep. Awesome talk. Thank you so much for coming on, basically educating us on the whole backstory of inspections and what goes on there. So I'd like to keep in touch with you, have you on the podcast again, but also let's get that book written.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, I certainly do appreciate the invite, Nick. Really love what you and your colleagues are doing with Insurance Nerds. Awesome community there. I love being involved in the Slack channel, listening to the podcast. You have some fantastic guest authors there that are putting out fantastic content. And so keep up the great work there. Excited to see, how that continues to progress and see what the future holds.
Yep. I appreciate it. Thank you. My guest this week has been Curtis Goldsborough. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks everyone. I never do this, but we should, if you're listening to this, if you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe or hit the 5-star button, whatever you need to do, please recommend that. I never do that enough. Let's get more people listening to this. We got interesting people like Curtis on. Let's share the message. So until next time, thanks Curtis. Bye everyone.